Welcome to Chaos Divided, your weekly dose of WholesomeHammer, where we explore the hobby, the game, and the lore of Warhammer 40k. We're your hosts, Nurgle Snurgle and BlushingNoiseMarine. This week, we're talking about terrain, how to build it, how to use it, and how to controversy over it. So today's quote, we did some digging and searching for it, and I think this is absolutely perfect. "You've let yourself be used as a distraction," said Dorn, keeping his gaze on his adversary, ignoring the blood pouring down his face. "You've let your host be decimated for nothing. The Saturnine ruse, I know about that too, has failed. Perturabo played his move and lost his piece. You're just a pawn. Was it the Lord of Iron who fooled you into this? Lupercal? Abaddon? You must have been willing. Were you getting bored with it? The spear tip is broken. You're holding a gate for no one. You're just an idiot standing on a wall." And this was Dorn to Fulgrim, an insult so devastating that Fulgrim left the star system. I'm sorry.
My boy,
I'm sorry.
my lad, my poor boy.
He took his lunchbox and left the playground.
He did. And everyone else got fucked over because of it.
Yeah, exactly what he wanted.
I mean, honestly, Fulgrim is on nobody's side. Fulgrim is barely on his own side most of the time.
Will he sabotage himself?
Fulgrim does some weird things, like in the Heresy. There's one point where after he kills Ferrus Manus, he gets possessed by like a demon prince.
Is that from the Blade?
Is it the Blade? Or is it, he like, basically, I know he lets himself be possessed so that he can like learn about demons and like what they're up to. And then, but like, it goes on quite a while. And then at some point he's just like, I got tired of that. So like, I'm not possessed anymore. And then I like, that's just how that part ends, I guess.
He casted out the demon.
Like, yeah, he's just like, no, I'm not possessed anymore. Goodbye. And you're always like, but is he? I have no idea.
Yeah. Was there any demon left inside?
Right? You're just like, I don't know. So, like, I don't know. Fulgrim has weird motivations most of the time. There are, like, many times where he just, like, makes the tactical blunder because he finds it interesting. Or wants to, like, challenge people.
There's that saying that's going around, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but mess around and find out. He loves to mess around.
Yeah, Fulgrim is in a constant state of messing
He
around.
wants to find out.
I think he does. I think that's odd. Like, Fulgrim falls to Slaanesh purely to find out.
He's the one that, where he sees the sign that says, don't push the button, he's going to push that button.
Fulgrim falls before anyone else. Like, Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children, like, descend into chaos before, like, Horus is even, like, really plotting the heresy. Like, they don't, oh yeah, like, you know, the whole, like, there's Noise Marines at Istvan. I think I've talked about this before. Like, they're gung-ho to fall to chaos, like, before it's even relevant.
Interesting. So would you say they're the first of any Space Marines to fall?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Like, the Meraviglia happens, like, very shortly after, like, Horus gets, like, stabbed with the dagger that, like, starts his journey to, like, chaos. And
the irony of their name, Emperor's Children, and their chant is just even more hilarious.
Honestly, the reason I love the Emperor's Children is, this is an episode about terrain, but here we go. Is purely because they are, like, when you create demigod, like, super soldiers, Emperor's Children are what you get. You get just, like, descent into madness. Like, if you create this, like, super being, like, of course they're going to get bored at some point and then just start, like, messing around.
You jack them up and they're hopped up on LSD or whatever.
Like, you know, you want to think, like, oh, you know, Rogel Dorn and Rabute and Lionel Johnson, you know, so dedicated and duty-bound. Like, no, that makes no sense to me. Fulgrim being like, I want to just, like, go ham and live my best life, whatever that looks like all the time, constantly, and descend into hedonism. That makes sense to me.
Did he have a good upbringing?
Chemos was his planet, and it was like a mining colony that didn't have enough. So like everyone was constantly living in a state of like malnutrition
No wonder.
and like scarcity.
So he's kind of living the rest of his life like never gonna have that, never gonna be without.
Well, he turns it around, so he actually like makes the Chemosian society like efficient enough that it actually starts producing in excess, and he starts this whole like cultural revolution. So there's like this whole renaissance of culture and arts, like basically from scratch entirely because of Fulgrim. He's actually he's the only Primarch who conquers his planet without violence. He's like democratically elected.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he didn't. There was no
Is it
civil
full
war.
on charisma?
Yeah, he was just like he just had good ideas, and they kept like he just kept like working on a grander and grander scale until eventually the people were just like, you know what, this like I don't know demigod thing seems to have some good ideas. Why don't we just let him be in charge of everything?
Okay, I'm on board. I like Fulgrim.
Right?
So what you're saying is he should probably lead the battles.
Well, I mean, by the time you get to the heresy, he's just like bored with it all. Like, he doesn't want to fight the crusade. He like feels wasted by it. Like that's part of why he descends to Slaanesh. Is he's like he finds it like monotonous and boring. He wants to be off like finding new things to do and like exploring like the bounds of humanity. And he's stuck fighting planet by planet.
And be efficient. He's probably seeing like there's actually no point in war.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like,
I'm so turned around.
No, like Fulgrim is like, you know, when we started the heresy, like he has like ennui. He's like done with it. Like, you know, because the beginning of the Horus Heresy takes place like after Ulanor. So like they've been at it for hundreds of years. And he doesn't enjoy it. He doesn't like it. Like, you know, they talk about the other Primarchs. Like Horus loves battle.
Yeah.
You know? Fulgrim's more similar to like Magnus, where like the thing he wants to do the least is war. And then he just keeps getting pulled into it, and like
whereas the loyalists always want war.
Well, they're like they believe in the Emperor's vision. So they're like, oh well, this is, you know, what is required.
And the Emperor wanted war.
Well, he wanted to conquer the galaxy.
I guess in any means.
And that, yeah, so the loyalists are like more comfortable with that.
Well, it's been about 10 minutes. Should we talk about that? Is unbelievable. I love that.
That's
or should we just make it the Fulgrim episode?
Do we want to make this the Fulgrim episode? We could make this the Fulgrim episode.
We could.
I mean, we could just make this the Primarch episode. We just talk about Primarchs for an hour. I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah.
But we don't have a plan for that next time.
Yes. If you would like to see that, you guys can let us know.
100%. And honestly, if any of you that are listening, you have questions or comments or things you'd like us to talk about, always feel free to send us a message, leave a comment, just let us know. If you're listening on Spotify, you can actually answer the question directly on Spotify. So,
can you?
Yeah. I always put a different question.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'll get on the train.
We're just two idiots standing on a wall and not knowing what we're doing.
I wouldn't want to be with any other idiot than you.
Aww. So I guess, you know, if we're talking about terrain I feel like is, you know, a bit of a contentious issue coming into 10th. People have a lot of different feelings on it, but I think, you know, and we'll talk a bit about that later. But I think to get started, what makes good terrain? Like it's terrain that can outlast an edition.
I can tell you the lack of terrain is bad terrain.
Ooh, that's true. There's nothing worse than not enough terrain.
We've been to those tournaments and you look at the bottom tables and you're just like, wow, I don't want to be over there.
Like, is that a shrub in the middle of the board? That's okay.
Look at the fence.
And, you know, having played some, like, kind of janky home games when I first got back to the hobby, and honestly, when I was a teenager, we played some real jank games. You know, there's definitely if you're using things like bowls and boxes,
Mm-hmm.
it's more than you think to make a good terrain table.
Mm-hmm. But I
Um,
think that works as well, like especially when you're just starting out. Like, say for example, with your Amazon packages, like the type of styrofoam in there, you can use that as well.
mm,
Like, there's nothing wrong with just using scraps and pieces, especially when you're training and you're in level 1 mode, and you can move on up to more elevated terrain.
yeah, like even a box cut into like
A ruin,
a
like an L,
corner.
yeah.
Yeah, honestly, is what fancier terrain is effectively.
Mm-hmm.
You might not have a lot of second levels and height, but you can still create like obscuring terrain pretty easily.
Yeah, it may not be as immersive as you would like, but you can craft it into that.
I don't know. I do love me a little cardboard box Warhammer every now and then. It reminds me of my roots.
Mm-hmm. Brings you back. Ah.
Brings me back to my fourth edition days when I was a teenager and putting together my first few units and dreaming of someday playing 1,000-point game.
Oh, that was your dream?
Yeah, like
You've
it
crushed
took a
your
while.
dream over and over and over again.
Well, at this point, no,
Yeah.
but back when you first start off, and we were like, okay, if I take every piece of war gear and I scrape this together, I have 950 points, and your friends would be like, okay, well, I have 980, and like that's what you play a game with like.
Mm-hmm.
Then that was floor hammer too. Like we were the jankest of jank.
Were you on like your knees playing?
Oh yeah,
Oh, I've tried
we were
doing
like
that.
16. It does. Well, I mean, it's uncomfortable. You like
Yeah,
can't
your
walk
adult
afterwards.
knees. Yeah.
But like I couldn't do it now.
No. Blood God, I've done that like a couple years ago. I'm like, I can't. My back, my
Oh,
knees.
floor hammer, no, you can't. You
I
hit an
like being
age
able
pretty
to
quick.
see like the bird's eye view, but I
Yeah,
can't.
it's very immersive when you're down that low. You feel like you're really in the battle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm
Because if you
quite.
stand up, you can't see what's going on anymore because it's too far
No.
away.
Yeah. You lie on your
Um,
belly with your feet in the air, like go Empress children.
I mean, it's okay. Well, that was back in my town days, so it was more like, can
Oh,
this broadside see that thing? Oh, I'm already on the ground. I'll just look.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I guess what also makes a good table is maybe having a table.
yeah.
Um,
Yes. Have you ever built terrain besides your
I
cardboard box?
No, nothing that's like no, nothing that's worth talking about. But I
Okay,
know
okay.
you have, and that's kind of where the idea for this episode came from.
Ooh.
So how was I think we're going to talk a little bit about building terrain
Mm-hmm.
uh, later on, but I guess we can start off with like, what's your experience with it? Like, did you find it worthwhile?
Building the terrain?
Yeah.
I love. Yeah, it was. Um, we started doing that a couple years ago, and it was definitely a great fresh, like breath of fresh air getting into the hobby. Like when I started, I was painting miniatures, and then tried our hands out doing terrain, and it was just like another portal of my imagination just opened up because it didn't have to be like on a model, or it wasn't like too concerned about dotting the i's or or like the intricate work, but like working on larger pieces. Yeah, I loved it. It was a lot of fun, and I find like there's a lot more creativity when it comes to terrain. Like it's literally from scratch.
No, I think to maybe start addressing kind of one of the big terrain controversies of 10th. I think if you want to build truly timeless terrain, there is a certain amount of kind of planning for it outside of the rules. And what I mean
Mm-hmm.
by that is making sure that, if you have big pieces of terrain, your big kind of blocking, don't put windows in it.
Yeah.
Don't let the rules be the what guide you through kind of the the intricacies of building terrain, like, build terrain that's functional outside of the rules and accomplishes what you want it to. So, locally we use a terrain kit that, fortunately, a lot of the pieces of it don't have windows.
Yes. There is a function to punch it out, but we all opted as a community just to leave them closed, just for the fairness.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a certain amount of like constructing your terrain with the idea of it being, line of sight blocking allows us to get away from some of the issues we're having over towering, for example. So the struggles with towering right now, for those of you listening that aren't caught up on that, is that the towering keyword now ignores obscuring in both directions. So if you're hiding in a piece of terrain that does have windows and is line of sight visible, but would normally be covered by that obscuring rule, you're now not. So you've got units that can just like stand on the other side of the table, and if all you have is windows, can effectively shoot at everything.
Yeah, and these are just knights have it.
Some of the bigger knights have it. Yeah, it's more to do with like taller, like the monolith has it. But it is an issue. Nobody wants to have their army shot off the table turn one.
Yes.
Especially if it's because they went second and their opponent can just shoot at every unit they have. So it's a very real concern, and the way to kind of get around that is having terrain that is actually just blocked, and you're not relying on the rule set from GW to account for that, because obscuring came out in 9th edition.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, and I know 9th was a big gateway for a lot of players, so they're not necessarily aware of the past, but you want to have some good line of sight blocking pieces on your table, so you're not having to home rule and play around with those things.
So you would say that that's probably the most important piece to have in your terrain repertoire.
I think having a good big, like, can hide like big knight piece of terrain, I think is really important. Like, I think every game you play, you should be able to hide at least one or two models that you really want to hide, and it shouldn't be like a struggle to do that.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I like the terrain that we have. Like, going into a tournament, I feel a lot more confident when I play my demons. Because
and it also shouldn't be like hidden in the back. Like, you don't want to be like disincentivizing somebody from like putting a melee unit back there either. Like, it should be kind of a central component to your terrain placement.
Okay, because we do normally play that big L terrain in the back corners. So you think that should be more in no man's land?
It depends on the, like, not necessarily in no man's land, but like in your deployment zone, but not in like the very back.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, like you should be within a few inches of like the edge of your deployment zone with it. Because if not, again, you're adding like a turn penalty for trying not to have your big unit shot off the table.
And I've felt that.
Yeah.
Because I try to clump all of my big units in the back, and it gets pretty full back there.
It's a big unclean party of ones.
I used to put my demonettes in there, and I used to call it my demonette brothel.
Demonettes need to be front and center all the time. That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
They need to be as close to the front as possible, or else that doesn't feel right.
Especially the old demonette models. Chef's kiss. If you know, you know.
But yeah, so, having that good terrain, no matter what it looks like and whether or not it's, aimed for competitive or narrative play, I think having a few pieces that don't rely on a rule to function is going to make, your job easier when you're building your table. And it's going to also cut down on those like feels bad moments with your opponent.
Yes.
And if, any of you listening run like a game store or events, like, this isn't just like, we're not just talking like you're at home, like having somebody over for some Warhams. Like, these are concerns that scale. If you're running a 40 table event, you want to make sure that your top and bottom at least have some of these like fundamentals in place.
Yeah, I've noticed that when we did have tournaments that had like variation of terrain, the talk of the weekend was always terrain, whether that table was good, that table was bad. And then you're not really talking about the games, you're just talking about the unfairness of the terrain. So I've noticed that when we went to the MT or the MDF terrain, everybody loves it. They've accepted it, and you don't hear as many complaints.
Yeah, and I think to talk about that, so one of the kind of nice things we have locally is a bit of a tournament circuit. So the Maritime Tournament Circuit, shout out to those folks.
MTC.
MTC. And it's they kind of solicited out to the community to also buy a bunch of sets of this terrain. So I think there's over 20 sets.
Oh, is there? Wow.
In Nova, I think that was around where the final uptake was. And it's also it's the same terrain that one of the local game stores also uses. So like I think if you wanted to have a 40 table event, I think we could pull that off, which is pretty incredible. To have 40 tables with the same like competitive aimed terrain on it is pretty awesome. And
I think that's definitely the goal here as well. And we've talked to the deck box about using the terrain collectively, and I know that it would be nice to see one day us having a major in Halifax, and I would love to see people fly from all around the parts of this world just to come, and it would be nice to see like what we can create. Like I would love to see Halifax have their own Adepticon. I know there's HalCon, but I'd love to see like more focus on like
a wargaming specific
competition
event.
Exactly.
But I think a big component of that is like because the community like rallied around that, and like this is something, if you're listening and you want to bring these ideas to your local community, like talk to some of your tournament organizers and your event organizers and see what the uptake is. Like if there's 10-15 people that all want to buy a set of this stuff and are comfortable like bringing it to events and like sharing it amongst, and even in Truro we have a few sets of it as well, so like we're able to bring that together when we were even having a smaller event. And you're really able to kind of change the tone of your games, because again, you're taking terrain out of the equation. Like good terrain should be almost not worth talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it changes the whole format to being about the strategy, the units, like what actually happened, like the stories that unfold on the table.
Amongst the models and not just the terrain.
Yeah. And not the like, oh, this piece of terrain got in the way and I couldn't make this charge because of it. And then,
this was open
that threw this off and that's why I lost. And
yeah. And that's what I was talking about. Like, that's what you used to hear from the weekends or the tournaments. And that's pretty much the whole focus. And now we've lost that and people are enjoying the game more.
Yeah, the last thing you want to hear is like, oh, I don't want to get paired onto table 7 because it's just not playable, or little Nurgle slap there.
Ow.
But yeah, like, and I think that's a good thing to like, for any type of game you're playing, whether it's narrative or like the terrain shouldn't be a concern. If you're playing a more narrative campaign and you want that immersive feel to it, like that's totally fine and that makes a ton of sense, but it shouldn't be like a problem.
Yeah.
Like you don't want your opponent coming and be like, I don't know how this is going to work, or I'm trying to do this and the terrain's in the way, and then you're slowing your games down, you're creating those like feels bad moments. The last thing you want to be doing is arguing with your opponent over like, oh, that's that, not that. And I think 10th has made that a little easier because there's far fewer categories for terrain.
And they have less like rules to them. Most of them just give you like the benefits of cover, but before, like difficult ground gave you -2 to your movement. That's gone.
Yeah. And there's nothing more annoying than trying to argue, like, oh, this base fits around that, so I
Yeah.
don't, like, I'm not going to have to go over that terrain, so it's going to cut off 1 inch, not 2 inches. Like,
Or getting
it's,
tanglefoot by custodies.
oh.
+2 negative. No! But to
Have you
kind
ever
of go...
tried?
Sorry, yeah?
You ever tried to make like a 4 inch charge and a Custodes player rolls a 6 on their Tanglefoot and you just go nowhere for absolutely no reason?
Honestly,
You're like, I
probably.
can
It
touch them
probably
already.
happened. And I, like, deleted that from my brain.
You're just like, no, that's. I don't think they have that rule
Delete.
anymore, thankfully.
Yeah.
I think
But
that
to kind
strat's
of
gone.
touch on, like, so a lot of our terrain came from TT Combat. Obviously not sponsored, but they have great MDF terrain. You can check out their website. They have like so much variety. Actually, I got lost on that website trying to find the terrain, but you can find it there. But so what we did was there was a core group of people that's running MTC, and they came up with this idea, and then they approached the community, and then they approached the game store, and we were able to get a cheaper price because of the bulk buy. And yeah, so just working together collectively with the community, with this organizer, and then with the game store just made a recipe for success.
Well, I think the game store like might have sold it close to cost too. Like it was because they again want to support the community as
Exactly.
well. It again, the hardest thing for getting any type of Warhammer event together is the train.
Yes, and
If we're
storage
talking
for the
about,
terrain. So if each person has their own terrain, they can use it at home. But we even did it a couple months back when we had that giant GT at the Shearwater. Everybody showed up with their terrain, and it just went smoothly from there. There was no stress about where the terrain is, how we're going to store it. It worked really well. Because storage of terrain is really like, if we could talk forever on that as well, like how to store it, where to store it, like do you have the storage for it?
For sure. And well, because it's bulky, like I have mine in like it's in like a big Rubbermaid tote. And I mean that's a little larger than it needs, but it because of the way it's shaped, it doesn't easily fit into anything's that much smaller.
Well, no, I will disagree because I have mine in like this little I want to say it's probably 12, like a foot by a foot square box, like it's fabric, and just how you can stack them, you can just kind of block them into one another. It's like Lego. I'll show you one day.
This is another one of those Nurgle is more particular than I am. And that sounds exhausting already. Just thinking about having to put it.
I'm like,
oh, this fits here and here, and then it goes dump like Lego blocks.
No.
That's why I use Gorilla Glue to put it together. It's not coming apart.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like, it does stick together, but for people out there, glue your train together because it will start to fall apart. It will start to wear and tear, and yeah.
Not if you use enough glue. It's not going anywhere.
I painted mine.
There's a guy locally that offered to paint mine, and I need to get. We've been waiting for nicer weather, and I don't know. It's been so humid
for a while.
Right? It's been raining for 3 months now.
Yeah.
Other than that brief break there was for a forest fire.
Yeah. Sorry, Americans. We got some of our air.
Sorry. But yeah, it's honestly kind of a game changer for community events as well. And just it changes the whole tone of things, and really, like, I have yet to meet somebody who's like not just a lover of it.
Yeah.
And it's something that, like going back to cost, like, I think it was $160, $170 for it. So, I mean, for almost 20 sets, that's almost $4,000 worth of terrain. No one person's got that cash to throw
or storage or
to like put into something that they're not going to use all of it all the time.
And I don't think there was a lot of like, I don't think people were reluctant to it. They were like, yep, let's do this.
Yeah, like, it's great. I use it at home too, and like it's great terrain.
And we're talking Canadian dollars, everybody. So if you hear 160, it's like, oh, it's Canadian.
It's maple bucks there, so don't. They're a little bit more numerous. We're not as bad as Australian dollars, but we're definitely not a freedom buck.
No.
But yeah, and I think this kind of leads into our next big point, which is like how to actually build a great table.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like I said, you don't want something that's going to be the talk of the game. You want it to be easy. You want it to be obvious. And that's where having, even if you want that more narrative looking terrain, it needs to be very obvious what it is. Like, think about how many inches up does something need to be. Don't put your shelf a second level at the 6.5 inch mark, because nothing's going to be able to get up there.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to have verticality, think about how would most armies actually move up into this space? How is it actually functional?
Mm-hmm.
So your average infantry unit moves 5-6 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Think in increments of 5.
Mm-hmm. That's very smart.
So that
I would say though, your first couple trains, use your cardboard box and just have fun with it. Just explore your creativity and what you can add to it. And this is just a progression, and then you'll get to the point where you will start thinking about the height and the inches and the windows.
Well, I only bring up height because that's now relevant for 10th.
Yes, because I just read that if you shoot down, what is it for the 6 inches vertically? More AP.
Yep. Which is a big deal.
As long as they're all on the ground, like your enemy target.
So for an edition that doesn't have as much AP in it, going from AP 0 to AP 1 is pretty huge.
So what I should do is put my Great Unclean One on top of a ruin and just vomit on everybody.
Can you? I thought.
Can I? No, they can't.
Monsters can't climb.
They can't.
No.
That's the other thing, is there's a lot of keywords that have changed. So, for example, Nurglings can no longer go through ruins. Only infantry and beasts, so I'm sorry, Ripper Swarms. Sorry, Scarabs. Unless you have that keyword, but yeah, Swarms cannot do it.
You know what? I am okay with it for Scarabs, because Scarabs drive me nuts.
Mm-hmm. They're scary.
I don't know why they're like the most difficult thing to deal with on a Necron list.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can just sit.
Come on.
Yeah.
They're
faster than they should be. They're tougher than they should be, and they're cheap. And they just hold objectives, and they are I don't know. There's always something better to shoot at, but then they're just point scorer. What?
Do they have OC?
Do they? They might have lost it. Oh, if they did lose it, then you're not going to see them anymore, and I'll be happy.
Because if Nurglings lost it, they better have lost it.
Oh no.
Or Nurgle riots.
I'm going to look it up for us. This is why having access to all the indexes is a super useful thing for everyone involved.
Right? Good job, GW. I'm very proud of you in this decision.
It won't last long, but it's good right now.
Speaking of which, I talked about it on my Instagram, but I'll just bring it up here while you're looking up. GW, if you're listening, please listen to our cries and our wants, but please do not make that app a subscription. If you want success, make it a base rate. I've seen the success with, say,
or even the code on the codexes like they used to do doesn't bother me as much.
Mm-hmm. I've seen it say there's an app out there for drawing called Procreate. It's $11 base pay. Everybody uses it. You will go on Instagram, you'll go on YouTube, and you see everybody using that app. Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop has the same thing. Not many people use it, and they're more like the professionals. But if you keep this app at a base rate, it will eliminate people from making a copy.
Mm.
You'll get more money that way. Trust me.
Scarab swarms.
They are swarms?
They don't have objective control.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Thank you.
So, you know what? I just went on about this rant, and GW already broke them. So, we can all breathe easier knowing we don't have to deal with scarab swarms anymore.
I can see the tension in your shoulders shrink.
It's true.
But yes, GW, listen to that. It will be the best decision you ever make. The community will thank you, love you, kiss you on the cheek, pat you on the back.
There you go. I don't know if I can add any more to that. I'm just happy about scarab swarms.
Yeah,
we're on different wavelengths right now. But yeah, when it comes to building that great table, having some nice big pieces of terrain, and like, don't be afraid to have a few. Like, have some bigger pieces that block line of sight. Don't just have like an open field for, you know, shooting armies to have a field day. Have like, think about how you're creating like sight lines and how you're, you know, how armies are actually going to move through the space.
Yes.
You know, if you
I was just about to mention that. Like, that's very important too, because there's going to be tanks coming in this edition and big models, and we do need that space to move.
I think, yeah, make sure there's multiple like 4.5 inch corridors where, you know, so those, you know, bigger units have options. You know, you might be sitting there being like, well, I'm a Tau player and I just want to make sure that I line up all of my shots. And no, that's not fun for anyone involved. You know, you don't want to make it so that it's predictable what your opponent's going to do. They should be able to look at it and be like, okay, I have at least 3 different strategies I can employ here.
Yeah, there shouldn't always just be a one strategy type of thing. And in the core rules, GW talks about it. They even talked about it last edition, but they really talk about it in this one, that discuss with your opponent before the game starts. Agree upon the footprint. Just like have a conversation. Do we call this that? Do we, where's this area? Where's the area of terrain? And that will save you headache or any gotchas going forward.
For sure. You know, you don't want to be arguing when it's relevant in the game. You want to have that decided beforehand. Yeah,
because you're already under pressure after two hours of gaming. You're down at the last wire, and if you have a little bit of a disagreement, it's just going to amplify that because the stress and the pressure is already there. So save yourself, save your heart a little beat.
Well, and again, you don't want it to come down to like, oh, well, we disagreed on this piece of terrain and that's why you won. That's bad for everyone.
We don't want terrain to be the excuse for a bad game.
Yeah. We don't want you to have any bad games at all. We want you to have great games.
Yes, great games only.
And, you know, because, you know, whether winning or losing is not what decides a great game. Some of my favorite games have been games I've lost.
Yeah.
And terrain is unfortunately one of those things that can make a great game feel bad. You want to take the what if out of a game. Well, what if the terrain had been better?
Yeah.
What if I had have had more options? What if I had have moved, you know, this way instead of that way? Would I have been covered when I thought I was covered? Like, you just want to take all of that uncertainty out.
Yeah. What if I pre-measured my movement so I didn't get stuck during a charge or...
Yeah. Like, you don't want your terrain to be in the way. You know, you want it to look obvious.
Now, we're definitely talking about competitive. If you want to have like a full board during your narrative, you can do that too. I think...
You know what? I think it still does apply, though. I think, you know, narrative, there's definitely more give and take. Like, it's okay if the terrain's not fair, but it should still be functional and obvious.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think the difference between competitive and narrative is more like the terrain doesn't have to be equal for narrative, but it does still need to function.
True. Very true.
Like, you know, don't just because it's a narrative doesn't mean that you should have 2-inch corridors that no big models can get down.
Mm-hmm.
That's just really not super fun for anyone with bigger models.
But that could also come down to a discussion like, hey, can we just kind of make up a rule that my big models, if they roll a whatever, they can go through the walls? Like, to me, like, narrative doesn't have to be just the rules. I feel like you can make up the rules coming to the table. Just have fun. Like, that's what I think narrative should be, is just have fun.
is narrative where we can have the Kool-Aid Man rule?
Yes. You mean the rule that should have been in 10th? Yes.
The one error to top all the other errors in 10th was the lack of Kool-Aid Man on Great Unclean Ones.
maybe in the Codex it'll come.
There we go. We
They're
keep
saving
hoping.
it for, yeah.
It'll be in 14th edition.
And I remember there was one of the episodes where I said that you could destroy terrain, and we were talking about this before the podcast. I think I was dreaming or chanting to myself that, like, you can just destroy terrain. It's not a thing. I'm sorry for that misinformation.
I think you wanted that so bad. I think you
did.
actually
I did.
decided it was true. Like, you manifested it in your own mind.
Yeah, it sounded so right. So
talking about some other issues we've seen with 10th, issues around objective markers. That's been one of the more recent ones. So you can have issues where, if we take a monster or a vehicle trying to charge, the objective marker actually will block being able to get into engagement range if there's another piece of terrain too close.
And that's
you can.
The objective marker is a big footprint too.
Yeah, like it's a 40-inch, or from that 40-inch, 40-millimeter base. So, I mean, if you have a wall too close to that, so again, thinking about, like, how is this terrain actually going to play, making sure that a model can actually be attacked.
I think something that would help with that is maybe making objective markers, like making a piece so you can put it on top of the objective marker. Like a little crate or a dead body or a little dumpster. I think that would be very nice.
A little nurgling.
Maybe a swarm.
A swarm of nurglings. I guess I should say a little pile of nurglings. But yeah, and I think that would make it easier as you're, like, placing terrain to see, like, where those interactions can happen, because you don't want to have, like, a 5 squad of Marines hiding on the back end of an objective marker and they can't be charged by anything,
even though they're like out front and center.
Yeah, they're clearly visible, they're clearly there. There's, like, a cardboard box in front of them, and there's, like, an armiger standing there, but, like, I don't know how to get into base-to-base contact.
I see you, but I can't get to you.
It's just like a Roomba walking up against a wall, like, whoa.
I guess I'll go this way.
Right. So he's just keeping that in mind. We're all learning kind of the different nuances of this edition, and part of the fun is learning those things, but just, like, as you're coming across them, like, don't set your table up to create those moments. If you know your opponent's playing knights, maybe don't put a wall 1.5 inches away from an objective marker. Don't create those opportunities for you to just hide from them. The important thing is to make sure you're keeping it fun for everyone.
Fun and fair.
Fun and fair. Unless it's narrative, then it doesn't have to be fair at all, but it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
The fun is not optional.
Fun.
Mandatory fun.
Are you having fun?
I'm having fun.
Oh, you sound it.
And I think all of these are good tips to keep in mind if you are building your own terrain. Now, I do want to hear maybe some Snurgle Pro tips on becoming a fabulous, fantastic terrain fabricator. I need another.
Fantastic. Whoa.
Fabulous. I think you're fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Just unlock your creativity. Some of the best terrain is just looking at something and finding the use of it. Like, for example, we built Orc Train for the deck box, and that's probably one of the most fun train we've ever built, because we could literally take flat cardboard and put a bunch of glue on it and just throw a bunch of rubble on it. And that was like our difficult ground for orcs, and that was a lot of fun, and painting it. So pro tip,
what are maybe some easier materials to get started with?
Cardboard, definitely. We use, what's the glue called? Oh, I'm blanking on the glue. There's like a type of glue out there. Oh man, we haven't built terrain in a while, so I'm kind of blanking on it. But we do use the pink styrofoam a lot of the time. That is probably a good use to have. You can easily build with. You can usually make it textured. You can use popsicle sticks. You can use like pretty much anything you have. Like I mentioned earlier, your Amazon packages that have all that styrofoam, you can easily just take that out and cut into the appropriate size and make that into terrain. Like, honestly, like I said, unlock your creativity and you'll be amazed what you can do. And there's a lot of people on YouTube that give tutorials and instructions on what to do and how to approach it. I guess that's my pro tip. Just have fun. Maybe draw a picture and see it out.
Make it a little slashy. Add glitter.
Oh, glitter bag. I have made stuff with glitter. You can make good gold with that.
Oh.
Yeah. Hot glue is also your friend.
Throne.
Hot glue will be your friend.
Hot glue is just, honestly, I use it for basing. And it's super... Well, I have like an ice theme, so I use it as like the kind of
like icicles type of thing.
More so, it's meant to be kind of like an icy plane. So you know when like a lake freezes, but not smooth, like you get kind of ripples and stuff.
Yeah,
it's really good for kind of creating a look of texture. And then I just use like a snow powder on top of it, and then because it's also glue, it just sticks to it. So it's like a really easy way to have pretty decent looking, like I've seen other people's snow and it looks too white. Whereas mine, like, because of that layer, I mean, I paint the bases white first, but then I use the hot glue. So then you have that almost like
shadow.
Icy clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like a depth and a texture to it. So it looks more like how snow actually looks like after a blizzard.
I know this isn't the tools podcast, but definitely, I think hot glue should be in everybody's toolbox. I've even put hot glue on models. There's a guy out there called Warsinger, and he makes all of his models out of hot glue. Check him out. He's amazing. And it's very delicately done. He makes the, I'm going to probably pronounce this wrong to someone, but the Satan from Necrons, it's just... He takes the wires and then he hot glues on top of that, and then he just has these models. You'll be blown away when you see it. But yeah, hot glue for terrain is also very important as well.
100%, yeah. No, I don't know how you would make terrain without. It's just like, different glues don't necessarily like stick together the same way. Like hot glue is like its own separate entity whenever you're using it, whereas some glues like absorb in and
Yes. Yeah, that's a good tip. Is there's certain glues that will do certain jobs when building terrain. But yeah, like hot glue is like, just think of it like melted plastic. You're just putting it in the grooves. But one thing I would like to say is keep your materials cheap. Don't go out to Michael's or like Home Depot and spend a lot of money on train supplies. You don't need that. You can just go bare minimum. There's some funky things you can do out there. I'll do a sidebar tip. Like, say if you want to add texture to your styrofoam, you can take tin foil, crumple it up, and just pound it into the styrofoam. It makes this really cool texture. Another cool trick is if you want to make bricks and you've cut all these little squares, you can put those squares or those rectangles into a container. I used like a coffee container, and I put rocks in there and I shook it all about, and it just made these bricks look that much more real. So there's a little tip for you too.
Pro tips all around.
Yeah. Do you have any tips that you would like to add
for making terrain,
or just anything about terrain?
I think I've said my piece about keeping it functional, keeping it fun. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, building your own terrain it's something, it's on my bucket list, we'll say. But learning how to build a table it's a skill in and of itself. And I mean, with 10th, we don't have a lot of guides out there, but as those start to become available, like, don't be afraid to, if you don't want to use like a standardized table from like, that you look up online, like, feel free to change it, but that gives you a nice starting point. Mm-hmm. So you're not just like looking at an empty board and being like, oh, how am I going to make this work? It's easier to adapt and easier to change than it is to come up with something from scratch.
For sure.
And if you're a newer player and you haven't built a lot of tables and you're unsure about it, take the free homework and copy it and see how that plays. But and again, when you start finding like, okay, this is what a good table feels like, and you start getting more acquainted with that, then you can start to play around with it a little bit more and, create different situations and create a little bit more variety. But, don't be afraid to like lean on someone else's learning, because it is a skill, and it takes time to refine it. It takes time to understand what makes a good table and how to see how a table is going to play. You have to play a lot of games before you can really start to understand that. So, yeah. I did. It came out left field. So there we go. I mean, other than our 10-minute intro talking about Primarchs, I think we covered a lot of what we were looking to talk about with terrain. And like I said, it's really good terrain just makes your games feel better. So with that, I'm going to thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to Chaos Divided, both here and on Instagram and YouTube at Chaos Divided 40K. And you can also find us individually on social media at Nurgle_Snurgle and at BlushingNoiseMarine. And until next time, bye-bye.